distraction.
Hey, everybody. I am Kevin Iole. Joining me again is the Hall of Fame broadcaster, the Sam Taub Award winner, the great Jim Lampley, who I should mention is celebrating 1-year anniversary with PPV.com. Canelo Alvarez will be fighting again, just as he was 1 year ago when Jim Lampley joined the company. So get to do this every now and then. Jim, I appreciate you. Welcome. How you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How are you, Kevin?
I am great. And I have to be totally blunt to start the interview. I am not excited about this Canelo Alvarez fight. Normally a Canelo Alvarez fight in Las Vegas, I cannot wait to see it, and I know it's going to be a big moment. Fighting Edgar Berlanga seems like Canelo just is taking the easy way out, frankly. And I'm kind of curious, how do you see this fight, and what is your take on Canelo's choice of opponent?
Well, maybe there's somebody in Berlanga's camp who is excited about the fight. Maybe Berlanga is excited about the opportunity, as he should be. If he's not, good luck to him, because he's going to need a better than expected effort to create any kind of obstacle for Canelo Alvarez. A fighter like Canelo Alvarez as an opponent, at this stage of Alvarez's career, you need to have a certain level of complexity and, boxing skills that extend across a broad range. And Berlanga is not seen that way. Berlanga is seen as something of a one-note tune. Now, the one note is good because clearly he does punch hard with power when he gets an opportunity for a straight-ahead shot. But how many times does Alvarez give you an opportunity for a straight-ahead shot? And what has happened in the past when guys have touched his chin? Not much. I've made the statement that he has the best punch resistance, the best ability to ward off the effects of power punches of any fighter in the sport. And so therefore, the one big asset that Berlanga can be seen to bring into the fight is usually the least effective asset you can have against Canelo Alvarez. And therefore, Canelo is a prohibitive favorite to beat Berlanga and move on to the other business that the broad range of the boxing audience wants to see. This is not the opponent that boxing fans would have chosen.
What bothers me about this, hey, look, Canelo's a Hall of Famer, right? I mean, I think we can agree what he has done in his career has been remarkable, and he doesn't have to do any more to get into the Hall of Fame on the first ballot. He is an all-time great, no question about it. But, he fought Avni Yildirim. He fought a super welterweight, Jermell Charlo. He's taken this fight. Even Jaime Munguia had just moved up to 168, and he was kind of a questionable guy. I think certainly a much more formidable foe than Edgar Berlanga is turning out to be. And do you think in any way Canelo was harming his legacy by these fights he's taken when he has potential serious challenges like David Benavidez sitting out there?
When these days, if you read really credible big-time boxing columnists like Kevin Iole, you're far more likely to be reading about the fighters that he isn't fighting than the ones whom he is fighting. He's not fighting David Benavidez. He's not fighting David Morrell. He's not even fighting the smaller Terrence Crawford. So in the eyes of people like you, Kevin, by and large, he's not polishing his apple. He's just holding it. And as long as that goes on, even his most devoted audience members and followers begin to get itchy about, okay, when are we going to see Canelo take a modicum of risk and give us a real memory to hold on to? These are not the fights that do that. Not Jermell Charlo, not Edgar Berlanga.
You covered Oscar De La Hoya for his entire career, and you two were very closely associated. And, while Oscar as a promoter in his personal life after, has been a little crazy, as a fighter, Oscar was one of the all-time greats. And the thing that defined Oscar to me was his ability his willingness, his eagerness to challenge himself against better fighters. And while I think Canelo is technically and physically a better boxer than Oscar, and maybe you disagree, I'll get your comment on that. But I think where Oscar really has shown is even later in his career, he went after Bernard Hopkins when he didn't have to do that, and those kind of challenges. And I think that's, something that I thought marked a young Canelo, but not marking a veteran Canelo.
So to answer the 2 or 3 questions you suggested within that setup, I think what's most important to recognize there is that Oscar De La Hoya was more risk-oriented than Canelo Alvarez, both in the ring and out of the ring. Part of the logic of Oscar becoming a promoter is that he demonstrated throughout his career that he understood what the audience wanted. And he took the opponents that were of greatest risk to him, regardless of what the outcome might turn out to be. Okay, he lost to Felix Trinidad. I don't agree with the decision. He lost to Bernard Hopkins. You can't disagree with a body shot knockout. But at the end of the day, he was reaching for audience impact, which in an individual entrepreneurial sport like this only comes from accepting risk. And no fighter I've ever covered was more willing moment to moment to moment, month to month to month, fight to fight to fight in his career to accept risk and accept the possibility that he could lose than Oscar De La Hoya. I should amend that to say no star fighter. Right. Because when you're a superstar at his rank, then matchmaking is a different process than it is for somebody who, like Edgar Berlanga, who's seeking greater notoriety and trying to come up the scale. Oscar was a superstar from the moment he turned professional because of what he accomplished at the Olympics in Barcelona in 1992. He understood it. He accepted the responsibility for it. He made fans love him more and more by virtue of doing that. But Julio Cesar Chavez twice early in his career, when you could have suggested, well, he's not really ready for Chavez. He went ahead and wound up getting 2 wins. And so, because of moments like that, he was the most important fighter from the standpoint of boxing's appeal to the public during his time in the ring. He took risks. He gave the audience what they wanted.
Jim, one of the things I think that made you so great as a play-by-play broadcaster was not only were you a great journalist and you had the ability to describe the action so well, but you had a good eye for what was going on in the ring, more so than a lot of play-by-play guys did and do. And so I say that I set that up to ask this question. Do you see any decline in Canelo Alvarez physically that may explain his reluctance to face a Benavidez?
So first, I love you desperately for the compliments about my play-by-play abilities. Secondly, I don't see any particular deterioration in Canelo. Maybe he's not as quick to the attack as he used to be at the moments when he senses an advantage. But at the end of the day, his job is to win. That's the way he sees it. And when he feels as though he has an opponent in trouble, he'll take a modicum of risk. But if he sees a situation where taking risk could lead to danger or damage at his age, after all of the fights he's been in, he doesn't press the issue. Against Munguia, he coasted in the late rounds. Right. I think he knew he was headed toward a decision victory over Munguia. He understood that even though he had shown himself to be superior in that matchup, Munguia was still dangerous. Munguia was a guy who could punch. As great as Canelo has been at taking the punch, and I think it's his #1 quality, the greatest punch resistance in the sport. Right. You never know when the dam is going to break. So he's really smart. He's really risk averse. He has a solid built-in audience. He's not at risk of losing it as long as he fights somewhat meaningful opponents through a continuing schedule. And he has proven right now that he can get away with not fighting David Benavidez, not fighting David Morrell, not even fighting the smaller Terence Crawford.
I want to just check on two other fights on the card. Danny Garcia versus Erislandy Lara for a 160-pound championship.
I was shocked that they were both still active. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't really know before I got the material that both guys were still fighting, because I covered them at what might be seen as the peak of their careers, and that was a while ago.
A decade, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So in preparing for the fights, have you watched Lara? And Lara has kind of changed, right? Lara was a tricky guy that, you couldn't hit, and he was hard. And now he's
stationary. Now he's trying to set up a big punch here and there. Yeah.
So how do you think that style now works against the Danny Garcia, who's always been a good little boxer? Danny, not necessarily the hugest puncher in the world, but, has good feet and seems to me to be able to, set up things very well.
Well, that's what makes the fight interesting. Does Lara in his new iteration have enough pop to make Danny pay? If Danny finds a moment to stand still and decides to do it, or does Danny simply keep moving, stay away, and not test the theory that Lara has more pop than he used to have? At the end of the day, they're both boxers. To me, they, neither one is a puncher per se, regardless of what Lara wants to do at this stage of his career. And therefore they're both boxers. So who's going to fight the better, smarter fight? I've picked against Danny Garcia so many times I can't count them. All right. And usually he has upended me. I'm not going to pick against him this time.
Oh, wow. That'd be interesting. Lastly, Trevor McCumbee.
I was going to pick him. I just said I wasn't going to pick him.
You're going to pass that one.
I don't know who wins that fight. That's a better way to say it.
That is a good one there. Trevor McCumbee against Caleb Plant. Caleb Plant, I think, really, he's one of the guys that's shown through a loss, right? He looked good against Canelo Alvarez. Not much was expected of him. People were talking about his lack of opposition. So I think if we make a comparison to Berlanga, right, Caleb Plant was more advanced than certainly Berlanga is now when he fought Canelo. But Plant, I thought gave a good account of himself and came out of that fight as big, if not bigger, even though he lost. What do you think the future holds if Caleb can get past Trevor McCumbee? Do you think he could be a player at 168 or 175 still?
Well, that's what he's trying to do. And, he's a smart tactical counterpuncher who has never been able to generate the fireworks necessary to get to a higher level. I have a hunch that he's probably still the same thing. So the essential question is, does he do enough in this fight and get enough attention for what he does to get one more good, meaningful paycheck in his career before somebody dispatches him to the retirement heap?
Yeah, no doubt. Let's end with this, because you mentioned it a couple times, and I wrote a column about this last year and a number of other columns. You mentioned Terence Crawford. Crawford, pound for pound #1 on KevinIole.com. He's 1, 2, or 3 on most places.
Yeah, but at what point do you remove him from the list for inactivity? Well, I mean, the fight against Madrimov, that was not the best Terence Crawford against Madrimov. So he either needs to come back in a hurry and show us something more impressive, or people are going to begin to say, I have doubts about what's left of Terence Crawford at this point. And he's still, who knows, maybe he's trying to decoy Alvarez with that performance. Maybe he was going in thinking, okay, if I can be just good enough to win, but look vulnerable, I've got a better shot at getting the paycheck I want.
Do you
hard to imagine that fighters do that, but Terence is a very smart, crafty, tactical guy.
Do you see anything? Did you see anything in the Madrimov fight that would suggest to you that Terence, who has been a thin, smaller guy, incredibly strong guy, but more on the slight side, could go to 168 pounds and fight somebody successfully like Canelo?
No. I just do not buy the idea of Terrence Crawford being a 168-pound fighter. That may, just knowing that somebody like me says that could help motivate him to want to prove me wrong. But
right.
No, I think if he really, really wanted to do it, he would have done it by now.
Right. Well, like he wanted to do it.
He would have gone up the scale. He wouldn't have fought a 154-pound fighter from Eastern Europe with no particular audience in the United States.
Right.
He would have found a 168 or 160-pound fighter with some cachet against whom he could prove something and get the kind of attention he needs to make Canelo pay attention to him. He didn't do that.
Caleb Platt.
He made it easy for Canelo to walk right past him.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. Jim, always a pleasure. September 14th, T-Mobile Arena. There's two big shows in Las Vegas that day. T-Mobile Arena, Canelo Alvarez and Edgar Berlanga. That's where Jim will be. UFC Noche down at the Sphere. That is going to be a crazy one as well. Jim, appreciate you as always.
Well, my favorite words in the language are when Kevin Iole says, Jim, I agree with you. So thanks very much. I enjoyed it a lot.
Thanks, brother.